I was born and raised here in the Port, and this is a place that really concerns me a lot, especially as it talks about and start thinking about climate change.
I think that the disconnect often people have is when you hear the word climate change, people kind of distance themselves. I think it's a really human thing, okay? Like, we don't understand it, therefore it doesn't really pertain to me.
A lot of people like to think that climate change is a distant threat, something that we don't need to worry about, but the reality of it is that it's already affecting us today, and it's only going to get worse over the next decade.
Climate change is a very important topic that people should start thinking about, especially our youth, and how it will impact our community.
The city of Cambridge is comprised of a number of different neighborhoods. The Port neighborhood is one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the city, and this is where our office is actually based. I've found this to be a very tightly knit community. There are a number of programs and services administered out of the Port neighborhood. We have the Boys and Girls Club, we have the Community Arts Center. We work very closely with one of the oldest settlement houses here called the Margaret Fuller House. And wouldn't you know it that this is also an area that abuts the innovation capital of the world in Kendall Square. I have the honor of leading the second largest local health department here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are responsible for the health needs for all those who live, learn, work, and play here in the city. This includes providing an array of services, as well as making sure that we work with our partners to address things like climate change and the impacts of climate change.
The city of Cambridge has been studying what the impacts of climate change may be on our residents and on our assets and infrastructure. In 2015, the city released a climate vulnerability assessment that modeled certain risks associated with climate change. The city is now working on a climate change preparedness and resilience plan. The first part of the plan will focus on the area near Alewife, parts of North Cambridge and West Cambridge. The second part of the plan will focus on the Port neighborhood, and then we expect to unveil a citywide preparedness and resilience plan.
In this video, we share issues identified in the Port area and strategies that might protect resident health. We're reaching out to you, the residents, to share information and to learn from you. Amongst the most important changes will be more days that are extremely hot. Increasing year by year, most of the days in summer could reach temperatures over 90 degrees within the next 30 years.
Half or more of the houses and residents that are occupied here by the tenants and citizens probably don't have adequate cooling at all, whether it be AC or other things. You know, most people are working with a fan or two at best.
This summer alone, we've had a number of days in the 90s, and it has affected us a lot in regards to our programs that we serve.
If we don't have central AC, we run with independent air conditioning units. We essentially had all the AC units working, and it was just so hot. We closed the doors so that each AC unit was trying to cool off an individual room. It just wasn't keeping up. And so, you know, we did have an instance where we actually had a section that was a brownout.
Folks, by and large, you know, the elderly and sick and the young and even infants and babies and stuff, I think those are for obvious reasons. You know, their age makes them more vulnerable to certain extreme incidents. But I also think that, you know, people who have other pre-existing conditions, imagine a kid with asthma, must be tough on them.
If you have diabetes and you take medication for that, or if you take certain other types of medications for mental health conditions, it may make you more susceptible to heat-related illness.
Another serious concern is flooding. Increases in rain and snow, as well as a rise in sea levels, are resulting in more flooding. Storms are getting more frequent and stronger. Some areas of the city will flood more. Some areas of the Port have flooded in the past.
A couple years ago when there was a flood in what I'll call the Cherry Pine corridor. Basically, it was a flash flood that kind of happened kind of midday, 3 or 4. And in this instance, many of the basements were flooded, you know, 2 to 3 feet of water. And it happened so quick that people had to react and kind of band together as neighbors to help one another out.
Particularly when the flooding happened back in 2010, I think we really had some challenges with getting our men connected and really keeping them on course with their programs they are part of really can even get into our health department to really access the programs that they were, a part of.
We're a prime example. I think about 5 years ago, there was a week where there was a lot of rain and our child care space was flooded. So we had water coming down our front and back steps. And so we had to close the program for about 3 days and have the water pumped out of our basement. And I'm pretty sure that if it happened to us in this old building, that happened to a number of people that have old houses similar to what we have here.
Interestingly enough, just yesterday we had this flash flood warning, which I had never experienced, and it was going off on everybody's phone. And that was just an interesting juxtaposition where you see the rains coming down, pelting us, and then all of a sudden everyone's phone is just going off.
As a nurse who works with families that have children with asthma to help make their homes safer, I do know that flooding can be a big problem. Flooding brings moisture problems, and that can cause mold and mildew and even destroy housing components that can lead to pest infestations such as roaches, mice, and rats. People that are most at risk are those who are living in flooded areas, people who reside in basements, people with asthma or other chronic diseases such as COPD or emphysema, and those who are very sensitive to heat, such as the elderly and the very young.
We want to be having a conversation about preparedness and what you can do to make yourself, your family, your neighborhood, your community more resilient.
We have to prepare, and we need to prepare. So I think part of that preparedness is really for us to make sure we're understanding kind of what our responsibilities individually and as a community, what's our responsibility.
Climate change is real. The impacts of climate change are real. So we're asking residents to do their part to prepare, but we're also doing our part. Our emergency preparedness unit, as well as our environmental health unit, they work very closely with partners to look at the impacts of climate change. In particular, they work with the planners, they work with the fire department. They look at the alignment of our plans to ensure that we have the appropriate allocation of resources to support residents, especially in times of crisis.
What neighbors can do when it comes to climate change is providing a safe space. You know, if you have a parking lot where you can park cars if there's flooding or snowfall, or if you have a big community space where you could allow people to sit in when there's a heat wave. And so I think sharing the resources that you have with your neighbors and other community members.
If you're living in inadequate housing and you're not equipped to deal with these extreme things, I think it affects the overall public health of the community.
A lot of the families that come to our site, actually some don't even have ACs in their households. So we do have a learning library here that kind of will host maybe about 10 to 15 people, and that has AC, and we allow people in the community on hot days to just come in, grab a book, or just kind of sit in a cool space.
One thing that we're trying to promote is to make sure that people sign up for emergency alerts. The City of Cambridge has a system called Code Red. You can go to the city's website and sign up for that.
I believe that it's important to have conversations on climate change, and we need that right now. So at school, if we just took an hour to talk about climate change and what we could do in those situations, it would be good, and it would educate everyone, including our youth.
One thing that people can do is make a simple go kit. So if you had to evacuate on short notice, you would have things that you could just grab and go. You could fill a backpack with a flashlight and batteries, 3 days supply of clothing, maybe some canned food. If you have pets, you want to think about their needs as well.
The best way to prepare for any kind of trauma or event is to know your neighbor. Go knock on the door, say, hey, my name is George, I live next door, and I'd like to get to know you and your family.
If your neighbor who's fortunate enough to have central air and your neighbor who may be elderly or maybe a little more fragile could spend some time in your house during the hotter times, that might be one way. Just neighbor-to-neighbor stuff.
To me, that's what the most important thing is. If we do that, then everything's golden because we're accountable to one another.
I know we have a close relationship with the Community Arts Center, so if something happens and they need to use our space or we need to use their gym, that's an opportunity that we have. And I think that's one of the things that is great about what's going on in Cambridge, that there is a collaborative effort to share resources and identify needs. So one of the things that we aspire to do here at the Margaret Fuller House as being an available resource to the community, we have this flat roof that we're standing on, and we also have a food pantry. And our goal is to hopefully use this flat roof and turn it into a green roof so we can allow constituents in our food pantry to grow food where they have an opportunity to take some of the food, but the rest of the food that's grown goes back into the food pantry to feed other members of the community.
You're already building up that resiliency, so it doesn't even matter what the traumatic event is. If it's climate change, if it's a community event, if it's a homicide, it's irrelevant because the resilience is already there. And therefore, by virtue of that, the community will rebound.
It's all about the children. It's all about the children.
Continued dialogue. I mean, it's important for everyone to have these conversations either, at your home, in your community-based organizations, in your social settings, whether that, I know climate change is not going to be something everyone's going to want to talk about, but I think it's important to have that conversation.
There are other things that people think about. They think about paying their light bill, they think about safety in the neighborhood, they think about just getting across town. And so, because of those realities, we try to make sure that, especially with the impacts of extreme weather events, that we make it easy for residents and guests to access any services and to feel supported through that crisis.
Start by preparing now, and this will enhance your neighborhood. Working together, we can build a stronger, more connected, more resilient community.
We can do this if we want to. We have to think with some intentionality. We have to commit to each other and accept the fact that when crisis happens, we're strong enough to get through it. And once we can do those things, I think we'll be in a better place.
We already have a community that works together. We have the creativity, the technology. Now's the perfect time to bring those three things together and make a big change and make something really cool.
We all want to hear what you think. This is your community. This is your neighborhood. Get out there, have a discussion, see what everybody thinks. Bring it to us. Let's get some ideas rolling and let's figure out what we can do.
I truly believe that it takes a village to raise a healthy community. The reason we put this video together is to share with you our thoughts, but also to hear from you directly. Please feel free to contact us if you have any suggestions, any questions, and any opportunities for us to learn. And also, you can learn more about the work of the Health Department by visiting cambridgepublichealth.org.
We love Cambridge. Let's come together to protect our community.
While filming this video, my house got flooded. I live in the city of Lynn. We experienced a flash flood. Within the span of about 20 minutes, my street flooded up to about 2 feet in water. And that water got into my basement. It flooded both my cars. My entire block was flooded. And it was really devastating to not only my street, but also the city of Lynn. And there were many parts in the city that got impacted by the flood. The first thing that I did after the flood was contact my friends over at the Cambridge Public Health Department, and I just asked for advice. I didn't really know who to turn to, and they were able to point me in the right direction. Not only give me information about mold and mildew and maybe how to think about treating my basement to make sure that I wasn't going to experience mold after the flood, but also just other resources within the community. Having good relationships with your neighborhoods, having a strong community, having a good network of folks that you can count on is key in situations of flood or high heat, and to be able to deal with such situations.